Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I've said on this platform that Zimbabwe is a failed state. And one of the consequences of being a failed state is that millions of our people have been forced into a life of abject poverty. This is a trap. And to get out of it, people have to understand why we got there. The immediate explanation, of course, is that Zanu PF got us there. And it's true. The Zanu PF dictatorship has been in power for 45 years, and 45 years of gross mismanagement, rampant corruption, and tyrannical rule have taken its toll on the nation. It has left the nation's economy in ruins. But one has got to ask, why is it that 45 years after independence, Zanu PF has managed to stay in power? Why? That question has to be addressed. And the truth of the matter is, as far back as the late 1990s, the people of Zimbabwe realized that Zanu PF was a party of thugs. They will continue to rig the elections and stay in power. And as long as they're able to stay in power, the country will be dragged deeper and deeper into this economic meltdown and political paralysis. The decision was made then. What should we do? There were two options. We could either take up arms again and fight the regime the same way the nation had taken up arms to fight the white colonial rule. Or we could elect opposition leaders whose number one task would be to implement democratic changes to end the dictatorship. Those were the two options. And I believe the nation took the right decision and opted to elect opposition leaders whose number one task would be to implement democratic changes to end the dictatorship. When Morgan Tsvangirai launched his MDC party, he promised the people that his party would implement those reforms. They even named their party the Movement for Democratic Change. That was 1999 when the party was launched. One has got to ask, why is it then that 25 years down the line, including the 5 years in the GNU, why is it that Zanu PF is still able to blatantly rig the elections and stay in power? As I've said, Zimbabwe is a failed state because for the last 45 years we've been stuck with a tyrannical, corrupt, incompetent Zanu PF dictatorship. So for the last 25 years, we have had the opposition, and people have risked everything to elect the opposition leaders. And their primary task was to dismantle the Zanu PF dictatorship. The truth of the matter is, Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends have forgotten the number one task of implementing reforms to dismantle the Zanu PF dictatorship. They've since opted to join it and to perpetuate the dictatorship. They had the golden opportunity to implement the reforms during the GNU. They failed to implement even one token reform. And ever since the GNU debacle, they participated in flawed elections out of greed. Knowing fully well Zanu PF was rigging the elections, knowing fully well that participating would only give Zanu PF legitimacy. And yet they've participated out of greed for a share of the spoils of power. The people of Zimbabwe have to understand that if we are going to have any meaningful change in the country. Here is Margaret Dongo, herself a former Zanu PF leader. She fought in the Liberation War, was a Zanu PF MP, and then became an independent. Here she is talking about the problem of the opposition, why we have failed to make any meaningful progress despite risking everything to elect the opposition.
And I'm like a social worker. You know, politics is not a business. This is what I want to remind most of our MPs and other people.
Do you think they look at it as a business?
Yes, they look at it as a business. Because they look at it as a business, seriously. Because the moment they go, business and employment creation, because if they go to parliament, you are employed. You get a car, you get a stable salary, and you are paid until your term is over. Already you are employed. If you are out, you're out of employment.
If you serve 2 terms, you get a pension?
You get a pension. Then already, this is why people kill in politics. They kill to be in parliament. This is why we have violence in this country. Because there is no employment. The only employment which is there is in politics. There is no other outside employment. So for them, a very good example is, look at what happened to CCC, the Triple C party. Have a look. When they lost, when they said they were rigged, what I expected from them, I expected all parliamentarians to say, we are not going to go to participate in a rigged system. And we are not going to sit in a rigged parliament. Because the elections have been rigged. So all of us were not going to parliament. Imagine what could have happened. We could have gone into new elections. There's no way Zanu PF was going to rule alone.
You think so?
Yes.
Do they care?
Caring or not caring, the public would have forced them, because the majority of the people would want representation in parliament.
But they went anyway?
But they went. They realized that, you know, you heard them complain, I used my own money to be in parliament. But what about me? We have voted for you. I used my own money. So the idea is to recover. Is it a business where you want to recover your losses? Is it a business? Politics, is it a business where everyone else, when you get in parliament, you want to recover your losses? A good example is now parliamentarians.
The point that has been made there is an important one. People have got to understand, to go back to the original position in the late 1990s. The opposition, MDC, the people risked everything to elect them for one primary purpose: to dismantle the Zanu PF dictatorship. What has happened in reality is that they, when they got into the GNU particularly, when they had the best opportunity to implement those democratic reforms, they realized that if they forget about the reforms, they could join Zanu PF and get the benefits of the gravy train and enjoy the benefits of being on the gravy train. And Mugabe exploited that weakness. He gave MDC leaders all the trappings of high office. Trappings they could not resist. The E-Class Mercedes-Benz for all the deputy ministers, the two deputy prime ministers, and Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai himself. And the MDC leaders forgot about the reforms. Completely forgot about the reforms. So they failed to implement even one token reform. That is the reality that we have got to deal with here. The people must understand what had happened here. And ever since the GNU debacle, they have participated in flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they are giving Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuating the dictatorship. But they've continued. One of the downside of the Zanu PF dictatorship has been that the regime has deliberately kept millions of our people poor. More noticeably, those in the rural areas. The issue of title deeds is an important one, much more so in the rural areas. Even Ian Smith realized that if you were to give the people in the rural area title deeds to the land on which their mud hut is built, they could do something with it. They will be able to use that as a stepping stone. If you've got title deeds to the land, you can afford to get a bank loan to build a decent house there, because you know that at the end of the day, you can sell the house and recover, or you can leave it to your children and your grandchildren. And if you've got title deeds to even 1 acre of land, you can improve that 1 acre. You can plant fruit trees, dig a well, do something with it. Ian Smith refused to give rural people title deeds because he realized that you give them economic empowerment. The next thing they would be wanting is political empowerment. And that he wasn't prepared to give. He did not want to give the blacks the vote. After independence, what happened? Zanu PF decided to do the same thing. They refused to give, even to this day, 45 years after independence. Zanu PF does not give the rural people title deeds to even 1 acre of land because the party fears that you give them title deeds and then step on the economic empowerment. The next thing those people would want is a meaningful vote. Here is Margaret Dongo explaining that very point, why Zanu PF has kept the rural people powerless and poor.
They have wrong priorities, especially the current government. How can you go and build an airport which services a few people, and the majority are the elite and the so-called investors? Look at the rural. I made you come to interview me because I wanted you to have the experience of the roads that we are using. If we go today to our hospital there, you feel pity with that's a hospital in a rural area. If we go to our clinic, you feel pity. We have no piped water here. Do you know the reason why the rural people vote for Zanu PF? One, they're intimidated. Two, the policy is that the rural people should remain poor and subservient to the government. They should remain poor because if they remain poor, they continue singing the song for their master. This is why these people have been impoverished. It's for a reason. Because at the moment, if you economic empower these people, they'll go out of hand. Zanu PF will never have control over them.
That is very true. And it's a point that many people have missed. Zanu PF has kept millions of our people deliberately poor for its own selfish political gain. It is ironic that having kept them poor, Zanu PF takes great pleasure, the same pleasure that somebody who goes to a zoo would take in feeding monkeys in the cage. Particularly during elections, Zanu PF leaders and their proxies take great pleasure in driving into the rural areas, particularly with hampers for the poor. Be it food, be it agricultural inputs. And yet they are the ones who are keeping those people poor and desperate. And now they're coming there as if they are the generous ones. It is really one of the most dehumanizing gesture by Zanu PF. You deliberately keep millions of people poor so that you can exercise your power over them by handing them food hampers, agricultural input. Even when donors have tried to help the people in some of these poor areas, the regime would intervene. Any help that people are supposed to get should come through the party, so that the party has got control over it. When it's handing over all these things, it will make a big song and dance that it is the generosity of the party. What I find so disappointing is that our corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless opposition have joined in. They too are taking great pleasure in going to our rural people and feeding them the peanuts like caged monkeys.
Ndakamirira WhatsApp Bikita South. Ndakutenda zvikuru zvataitirwa zuva ranhasi namadha vedu Mai Matara. Vatirangarira tatanga gore redu 2026 neramangwana rakajeka. Tawana rubatsiro vana vedu vechikoro kubva paECD 0 grade kusvika pasecondary. Tawana rubatsiro rwamabhuku namakavha nesanitary uye yavatipa vasikana vedu vapuwa zvokushandisa. Tinoda kuzvitenda. Zvinoratidza kuti tatanga gore redu 2026 zvakanaka. Tinoda kuti mai vawedzerwe makawanda chingovati makorokoto tatanga.
How sickening is that? These are the same CCC leaders who participated in the 2023 elections, knowing fully well the process is flawed, knowing fully well that Zanu PF was rigging those elections. And even when SADC and the AU election observers had condemned those elections as flawed, they still insisted in taking up those few gravity seats that Zanu PF allows the opposition to win, and thus giving the process legitimacy. And now, occasionally, they take some of their wealth from being on the gravy train seat, on the gravy train, and buy the peanuts, go to the rural areas and feed this to the rural people, to the poor that they are helping to cage. They are working now with Zanu PF to help cage the poor. That is the tragic reality. I think the people of Zimbabwe have to wake up and accept that the opposition, the MDC, CCC, while the nation elected them to implement the democratic reforms to dismantle the dictatorship, these MDC, CCC leaders sold out in implementing reforms, and they've since been participating in flawed elections to perpetuate the dictatorship. And as if that is not enough, now the idiots are gloating overhanding a few trinkets to the poor, like one feeding peanuts to the monkeys in a cage, when they are actually helping to keep the poor caged. They want them they want to stay in power and help the poor stay poor. The people themselves have got to wake up to that reality. Otherwise, this will never end. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. Think about it.